We saw this slide back in Module 1. The figure shown is embedded in the periodic assessment and facilitators training presentations, and it is also in our dam safety and levee safety policy documents. It shows that risk is a function of the hazard, the performance, and the consequences. As we discussed back in Module 1, there are three different types of risk we will consider: incremental risk, non-breach risk, and residual risk. In the upcoming slides, we are going to step through the general equations we use to calculate each type of risk. The incremental risk is the risk that exists due to the presence of the dam or levee. The risk can either be associated with life loss or economic cost. It is calculated by taking the product of the hazard, the performance, and the incremental consequences, and then summing them up for all hazard conditions. We're taking the probability of the hazard and multiplying it by the conditional probability of failure or system response, which is the probability of failure given the same flood or earthquake considered in the first term. The product of these first two terms is the annual probability of failure, or APF. To get the risk, we then multiply by the associated incremental consequences of failure. Incremental consequences are equal to the difference between the consequences associated with a breach, component malfunction, or improper operation, and those without. For the incremental risk, we're only considering the increase in consequences to calculate the risk associated with the dam or levee not performing as intended. Non-breach risk is the risk associated with the dam or levee operating as intended or overtopping without breach. Although the dam or levee may function as intended, the population in the reservoir area and downstream of the dam or in the leveed area are at risk due to non-breach flooding. Because we are considering the intended operation, there is no term for dam or levee performance. We are assuming that it performs as intended, so that term becomes 1. This makes the non-breach risk a function of the hazard and the non-breach consequences. We'll multiply those two terms together and then sum them up over all hazard intervals to get the non-breach risk. To distinguish the non-breach average annual life loss and the average annual economic cost from that of the incremental, we'll use a subscript NB at the end of each term. Lastly, the residual risk is the risk of inundation at any time. Inundation can occur whether the dam or levee performs as intended or not. So the residual risk is equal to the sum of the incremental risk and the non-breach risk.